The email notification was a quiet chime, a digital whisper that shattered my world. It wasn't a client file or a market report. It was a hotel confirmation. For two, sent from my wife's personal account to my top director. The subject line, "Our Weekend." My office, on the 47th floor overlooking the Chicago River, suddenly felt like a cage. For 20 years, I'd built Nexus strategies from nothing. It was my legacy, my life. And in that single devastating moment, I realized it was also my greatest weapon. They thought they had taken something from me. They had no idea what I was about to take from them. This wasn't just business anymore, this was retribution. My wife, Elena. To Chicago's elite, she was the perfect corporate spouse, charming clients at galas, her hand always resting proprietarily on my arm. She didn't love me. She loved the status Nexus afforded her. She wore my success like a vintage fur, and I'd been too blind to see the coldness underneath. Then there was Julian Vance, my director, my protégé, the brilliant kid I'd pulled from obscurity and molded into a titan of the industry. I gave him everything, my trust, my knowledge, my future plans for the company. He called me a mentor, once even a father figure. The memory made my stomach churn. I could see it now with sickening clarity. The shared glances over crystal champagne flutes, the private jokes I was never privy to. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting a coup, planning to take my company, my life. They saw themselves as the future of Nexus, a future they were building right under my nose. They forgot one simple fact. I owned the company. The email was the detonation, but the bomb had been assembled for years, piece by painful piece, right in front of me. I just refused to see it. Elena didn't fall in love with me. She audited me. We met at a university gala, where I was the keynote speaker. After my speech, her questions weren't about my philanthropic work, but about Nexus's 5-year growth projections and my personal equity. She wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for a controlling interest in a life she couldn't build herself. I was so starved for a partner who understood my world that I mistook her clinical ambition for shared passion, a fatal error. Julian was my mistake, but Elena was his sponsor. I hired him 8 years ago, a hungry analyst from a second-tier firm with a predatory intelligence I found compelling. But it was Elena who kept putting him in my line of sight. "He reminds me of you, Marcus," she'd say, her voice like honey. "That same drive, you should give him more responsibility." It wasn't a compliment, it was a campaign. She was grooming my replacement. I gave him opportunities, and he devoured them. He rose through the ranks on my guidance, my contacts, my strategies. He was brilliant, I couldn't deny it, but his loyalty was a performance. I see that now. The memory that now burns brightest is from 6 months ago, the night we celebrated the Vanguard acquisition. I walked into my home study to grab a vintage port and found them standing too close together, heads bent over my private company ledgers, which I kept locked away. They sprang apart when the door opened. "Just admiring your empire, Marcus," Julian said, that easy smile never faltering, truly inspiring. Elena simply glided over and kissed my cheek. "We were just talking about how proud I am," she cooed. They weren't admiring it. They were appraising it, sizing up the castle before storming the gates. After that night, the accidental power plays began. Julian being mistakenly CC'd on sensitive board-level communications. Elena helpfully suggesting Julian lead the pitch for the lucrative Kincaid merger, a project I had personally earmarked for myself. "You should delegate more, darling," she'd insisted. "Let the young lions hunt." They weren't just having an affair. This was a coordinated, long-term assault. They saw me as the aging king, a relic to be managed and, eventually, disposed of. They saw themselves as the future of Nexus, my future. They made one critical miscalculation. They forgot that the king is the only one with the key to the kingdom, and I was about to melt it down. My rage didn't burn hot, it froze. It became a cold, clear, intricate blueprint for destruction. I didn't scream, I didn't throw a single thing. I simply picked up my personal coat, walked out of my own building and bought a burner phone from a corner store paying in cash. My war wouldn't be fought with memos and board meetings. It would be won with whispers and untraceable signals. My first call was to a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't dialed in 5 years. Alistair Finch, the silver-haired shark who ran Apex Global, our most ruthless and effective competitor. The very company Julian often cited in meetings as a cautionary tale of corporate barbarism. Finch answered on the second ring, his voice like gravel. "Yes?" "Alistair, it's Marcus Thorne." The silence on the line was heavy, thick with years of rivalry. I could almost hear him calculating the angles. "We need to talk," I said. "Off the record. Face to face." A low chuckle rumbled through the phone. "Marcus, to what do I owe this clandestine honor?" "I'm selling my company," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "And I thought you should have the first offer." That evening, I played my part. Elena found me in my home study, staring at a blank monitor, a glass of untouched scotch on the desk. She placed a cool hand on my shoulder, the gesture practiced and hollow. "Long day, darling?" she asked, her voice laced with that cloying counterfeit sympathy. "You look exhausted." She let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the calibrated strike. "Maybe it's time you took a real step back. Let Julian handle the Kincaid merger. He has the energy." I didn't look at her. I just stared at my own weary reflection on the dark screen. I let out a long, slow breath. "Maybe you're right," I murmured, letting the sound of defeat fill the room. "Maybe it is time." In the reflection I saw her smile. It was a tiny, triumphant flicker. A predator tasting blood in the water. She thought she was winning. The next morning, I called Julian into my office. The pride was radiating off him, the scent of his impending victory. I slid the thick Kincaid merger file across my polished desk. "It's yours," I said, my voice deliberately flat. "Lead the pitch. Elena thinks you're ready. Don't prove her wrong." His eyes widened, a flash of pure, unadulterated ambition he couldn't quite conceal. "Marcus, I'm honored. Are you sure?" "I'm delegating," I said, using their own word as a weapon. "Go be a lion." He practically floated out of my office, clutching the file like a scepter. The young king, so eager for a crown that was already being melted down for scrap. My meeting with Alistair Finch took place in a dusty, forgotten steakhouse in the Loop, the kind of place where secrets were currency. He was older, but his eyes were still a predator's. "You're selling," he stated, skipping the pleasantries. "Nexus is your baby. Why?" "I'm tired of the game," I lied smoothly. "Time to cash out." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, not buying it for a second. "There's blood in the water, Marcus. I can always smell it. What's the real story?" I leaned forward. "The story is, you get my company, my client list, my entire market share for a fair price. I'll even stay for a 90-day transition. But there is one condition. It is absolute. It is non-negotiable." "I'm listening." "My executive director, Julian Vance, and my entire senior management team, they are to be terminated on day one. Clauses fully enforced, their access cut, their careers kneecapped. I want them out of the industry." Alistair stared at me, the gears turning. He wasn't analyzing a business deal anymore. He was looking for the wound. And then, he saw it. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He didn't need the details. He understood. He didn't just see the wound, he admired the scalpel. "A corporate decapitation," Alistair mused, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. "Surgical, messy. I like it. Consider it a signing bonus." He extended a hand across the scarred wooden table. "Send your lawyer the papers. We'll have this done by the end of the week, quietly." I shook his hand. The contact was cold, final. A deal with the devil to cast out 2 lesser demons. The following days were a masterclass in deception. I moved through my life like a ghost haunting my own existence, my face a carefully constructed mask of weary resignation. I was the beaten man, the defeated king, and they, the victors, grew bolder with every passing hour. Elena was insufferable. She treated me with a condescending pity that was far more insulting than her anger ever could have been. One evening, she floated into the study, a stack of glossy travel brochures in her hand. "I was thinking, darling," she began, not looking at me but at the photos of white sand beaches. "Once the Kincaid deal is settled and Julian takes over the day-to-day, we should take a long trip. Just the two of us. A real break for you." The implication hung poisonously in the air. My reward for my life's work would be to be shipped away, while she and her lover ruled my kingdom. I just nodded slowly. "That sounds restful," I said, the word tasting like ash. Her smile was blinding. She believed it. At the office, Julian was a whirlwind of frantic, self-important energy. He practically lived in the main boardroom, his team fueled by coffee and ambition, prepping for the Kincaid pitch. He'd stop me in the hallway, not to ask for advice, but to give me condescending updates, a general briefing his king on a battle he was sure he'd already won. "The projections are looking even better than we anticipated, Marcus," he'd say, a proprietary gleam in his eye. "This is going to redefine Nexus." I'd clap him on the shoulder, a gesture of paternal pride I no longer felt. "I have no doubt, Julian, it's all on you." He thought I was handing him the future. I was letting him build his own gallows. On Thursday afternoon, a secure digital package arrived on my personal tablet. It was from Alistair's lawyers, the final, executed documents transferring full ownership of Nexus Strategies to Apex Global. The sale was complete. The transaction was irreversible. I stared at the signature line, Marcus Thorne. It was the last decision I would ever make as the owner of my company. My finger hovered over the email draft I'd already written. The subject line was simple. Urgent. All hands meeting. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. All I had to do was press send. My finger pressed the screen. A flicker. A whisper of data. And the message was gone, deployed into the digital bloodstream of the company I had built and just signed away. Send. The single most destructive act of my career, executed with the casual indifference of ordering a taxi. A deep, profound calm settled over me. It wasn't peace. It was the serene focus of a sniper who has found his target and is simply waiting for the perfect moment to squeeze the trigger. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Julian. "All hands tomorrow. Big news, I assume. Don't worry, Marcus, I'm ready for it. The team and I are going to nail this Kincaid pitch first. You won't be disappointed." He was practically vibrating with hubris. He thought the meeting was his coronation. He thought the pitch was his final exam. He had no idea he'd already failed the only test that mattered, loyalty. I didn't reply. That evening, the house felt different. It was no longer my home. It was a stage, and I was in the final act of a long-running play. Elena found me in the living room, a book open on my lap, though I hadn't read a single word. She was dressed for dinner, shimmering in a silk dress that probably cost more than my first office lease. "An all-hands meeting, darling?" she asked, her voice a perfect blend of feigned curiosity and genuine excitement. "Is it time to make the announcement?" "What announcement would that be, Elena?" I asked, turning a page. She laughed, a light, airy sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Marcus, don't be coy. Your retirement, your new advisory role. Letting Julian take the reins. You're finally listening to reason. I'm so proud of you for making the smart decision." She came over and perched on the arm of my chair, trailing a manicured finger down my sleeve. "Just think," she purred. "No more stress, no more late nights, just us." She gestured back to the travel brochures, still sitting on the coffee table. "Our future." I looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in what felt like a decade. I saw the intricate web of lies and ambition behind her eyes. I saw the cold, transactional heart that I had mistaken for a partner's. I gave her the smile she wanted, the smile of a broken man. "Yes," I said softly, "our future. It all starts tomorrow." Her own smile widened. The final piece of her plan had clicked into place. She thought she was my future. In reality, she was nothing more than collateral damage. Later that night, long after her breathing had settled into a steady rhythm beside me in our cavernous bed, I slipped out and went to my closet. I didn't pack for a tropical vacation. I packed a single, well-worn leather duffel bag, a few changes of clothes, a hard drive containing my personal financials, all recently firewalled from our joint accounts, a copy of a signed lease for a new apartment overlooking the lake, a place she didn't know existed. I worked with the quiet, methodical precision of a man dismantling a bomb. Each item I packed was a wire I was cutting, severing a connection to the life I was about to incinerate. On my way out of the closet, I paused by her jewelry box, left open on the dresser. The centerpiece was a diamond necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary, the night I'd closed the deal that made Nexus a national player. I remembered her exact words. "It's magnificent, Marcus, a symbol of everything we've built." I picked it up. The diamonds were cold, hard, and lifeless. I let it slip from my fingers, leaving it coiled on her pillow. A final, silent message. She didn't build anything. She was just a guest in the house. And her visiting hours were over. The next morning I bypassed my usual collection of custom-tailored power suits. Instead, I chose a simple charcoal gray sweater and dark trousers. It wasn't the uniform of a CEO. It was the attire of an observer, a spectator. As I drank my coffee, I made one last call on my burner phone. Alistair Finch answered instantly. "Everything is in place, Marcus," his gravelly voice confirmed. "My transition team is staged in a hotel 2 blocks from your office. The moment you give me the signal, they move. New keycards are active. IT is standing by to initiate a full systems lockout. Legal is ready to serve the termination papers. When the guillotine falls, it will be swift and absolute." "Good," I said and hung up. Driving into the city, I saw Chicago waking up. The same commute I'd made 10,000 times felt alien. I wasn't a king returning to his court. I was an executioner arriving at the gallows. As I walked into the lobby of the Nexus Tower, the security guard gave me his usual, "Good morning, Mr. Thorne." It was the last time he would. I rode the elevator to the 47th floor. The doors opened onto the main conference room, where the meeting was to be held. The room was buzzing, filled with the nervous, excited energy of people who sense a momentous change. And there they were, at the center of it all. Julian, holding the Kincaid file like a holy text, surrounded by his senior team, all of them flushed with impending victory. And Elena, standing beside him, not me. Her hand was resting on his arm, a gesture of ownership. They looked up as I entered, and they both smiled. It was the same triumphant, predatory smile I'd seen in my study. The smile of successors. They thought this was their moment. They thought this was the first day of their new empire. I walked to the front of the room, stood at the podium, and looked out at the faces of the company I once called my own. They were all looking at me, waiting for me to pass the torch. I was just there to light the fuse. I let the silence hang in the air, a heavy blanket of anticipation. My eyes found Julian, standing proudly beside Elena, his chin lifted, ready. I offered him a small, empty nod. "Good morning," I began, my voice amplified slightly by the room's microphone, calm and measured. "I know there's been speculation about the future of this company, about a change in direction." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the faces of my employees, people whose mortgages I paid, whose careers I had built. Then I looked directly at Julian. "I'm here to confirm that a new chapter for Nexus begins today." A wave of relieved excitement washed through the room. Julian's posture straightened, the conquering hero. Elena's smile was radiant, a solar flare of triumph. She thought my next words would be about my retirement, about his promotion. To secure our long-term dominance, I continued, my voice dropping to a colder, harder tone. I have made a decisive executive decision. I have sold my company. The word sold landed like a stone, silencing the buzz. Confusion replaced excitement. I saw Julian's brow furrow. He exchanged a quick, worried glance with Elena. I am pleased to announce, I said, letting each word detonate slowly, that as of 9 a.m. this morning, 100% of Nexus Strategies, its assets, and its client contracts were officially acquired by Apex Global. The name hit the room like a physical blow. A collective gasp sucked the air from the space. Apex Global wasn't a partner. They were the enemy, the barbarians at the gate. The room erupted in panicked murmurs. But my focus was on two people. Julian's face had gone completely white, the blood draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. The Kincaid file slipped from his numb fingers, scattering papers across the floor. Elena's mask of triumph had shattered, replaced by a horrified, slack-jawed disbelief. "Marcus, what have you done?" Julian stammered, his voice a choked whisper. "I did what a CEO does, Julian," I said coolly. "I secured the best possible deal." As if on cue, the main conference room doors swung open. Alistair Finch strode in, flanked by 4 men and 2 women in severe gray suits. They moved with the cold efficiency of an occupying army. My former employees shrank back from them. Alistair gave me a curt nod, a silent acknowledgement of a contract fulfilled. "This is Alistair Finch, your new CEO," I announced to the stunned room. "His transition team will now be handing out your new employment packages. Some of you will stay, some of you will not." One of the gray-suited women walked directly up to Julian, not even making eye contact. She placed a thick legal envelope on the table in front of him. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Your non-compete clause is absolute and will be enforced to its fullest extent." Julian just stared at the envelope, his entire future reduced to a stack of paper. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading betrayal. "Marcus, why?" I walked past the podium, closing the distance between us, until I was standing right in front of him and Elena. I looked down at the brilliant protege I had created, now just a ruined man. "You wanted to be a lion, Julian," I said, my voice low enough so only they could hear. "You just forgot who owned the jungle." Security guards, now wearing Apex ID badges, materialized on either side of him. They gently but firmly took his arms. He didn't resist. He was a ghost, already gone. As they led him away, Elena finally snapped out of her shock, her face twisted with fury. "You bastard," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "You did this to spite me. You've ruined us." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then met her gaze. The fire in her eyes was met with nothing but ice in mine. "There is no us, Elena," I said, pulling my arm free from her grasp. "There was only ever me and you. And you made a bad investment." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, pristine key to our house. I pressed it into her palm. "The locks will be changed by noon. I'd have your things out before then. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." I turned my back on her, on the chaos of the transition team moving through the room, on the whispers and the tears. I walked out of the conference room without looking back. The entire 47th floor was a scene of controlled pandemonium, strangers in gray suits at desks, unplugging computers, collecting keycards. I didn't stop. I walked to the elevators, rode down to the lobby, and crossed the marble floor for the final time. At the security desk, I placed my own keycard down. A small piece of plastic that I had left on the counter. The guard just nodded, his expression unreadable. Outside, the Chicago wind hit me, sharp and clean. It didn't feel cold. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in a decade. I didn't look back at the tower that bore my name. It was just a building now. A tombstone for a life I had just buried. I walked 2 blocks and hailed a cab, giving the driver an address on the Gold Coast he wouldn't have recognized as mine. The apartment was sparse, modern, and anonymous. It overlooked Lake Michigan, a vast, gray expanse of water that promised nothing but distance. It was the opposite of the opulent prison Elena and I had called home. There was no art on the walls, no inherited furniture, no ghosts. It was a blank slate. I sat on the single leather armchair, pulled out the burner phone, and powered it on. The screen exploded, a flood of notifications, a digital tidal wave of desperation. 37 missed calls from Elena, 22 from Julian. An unreadable number of texts, a torrent of panicked, furious, and pleading words. It was the sound of their world collapsing. I let my thumb hover over the notifications before tapping on a single voicemail from Elena, time-stamped just 10 minutes ago. Her voice, usually so polished and controlled, was a raw, ragged thing, shredded by panic and disbelief. "Marcus, pick up. You can't do this. The accounts, my cards are declined. Marcus, you've destroyed everything. Our life, what am I supposed to do?" The message ended with a choked, desperate sob. I listened to it once. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel joy. I felt quiet. It was the quiet of a storm that has finally passed. I held down the power button, and as the screen went dark, I erased all of it. Her pleas, his panic, their entire pathetic legacy. I tossed the dead phone into an empty trash can. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, I watched the waves roll in. The future was no longer a 5-year projection or a hostile takeover. It was just the water, the sky, and silence. My silence, won and paid for. So I have to ask you all, was selling the company behind her back a justified act of revenge, or did I go too far and become the villain myself?